After she's admitted to the hospital, she's lost over 30 pounds. She's absolutely skin and bones. You can see that she's got bruising here. I've seen her when she said bruises covering her whole arms. You can see how thin she is. She's plugged into wires. This is not too long after you saw her when she's a perfectly vibrant, vital woman, and now she's in the hospital, flat on her back, hooked up to all kinds of equipment.
My name is Fran. They call me Fearless Fran. I do disaster relief. I'm an RN, and I want you to know about my son, Brad Rakowski. Brad's in a guardianship, and I'm not allowed to see him, and he's not allowed to speak to me or see me. I take his picture to Congress. I take it to Tallahassee. I go into the senator's office and introduce my son by the picture, and I give him an affidavit and tell him a little bit about his story.
And we'll be learning a little bit about it. We'll be learning a bit about it on the train we take.
This is Brad Rakowski. Is a very bright young man. He has cerebral palsy, but he's very, his cognitive level is very high. He actually met Stephen Hawking, the physicist, at an augmentative communication device seminar, and I didn't know who the physicist was, but Brad was talking to him with his communication device, which by the way was removed from him because he made a criminal report to the sheriff's office about his guardian, and the guardian removed his communication device from him. He no longer has access to his communication device, so he can make no further reports about abusive issues that the guardian is doing. So,
And who is the guardian?
the guardian is Sergeant David Commodirio. He worked for Judge Nancy Alley. He's involved with security in the 18th Judicial Circuit, and he's a distant relative of my son. I've only met him once, but he found out that my son was going to inherit some money from me and my husband. When we were out of town, he got guardianship of my son as an adult, and sold his home, sold his power wheelchair, sold his custom van. He had a custom home with the Hoyer lift in the ceiling that went out to the hot tub and swimming pool. Everything we did was to adapt our lives for Brad's comfort, and now he's isolated from his family, and it's very difficult for me as a mom. There's no legal reason why I should be kept from him. I am a registered nurse. I'm actively licensed in the state of Florida. I have no criminal background, no child neglect, no abuse, and yet the 18th Judicial Circuit is isolating my son from me. And hopefully we can put a stop to this nationwide. It's an ugly thing to do to a human being, to isolate them from their family.
No, because you took advantage abusing an old lady. You don't have no clue. It's just some years I take care of them, with the husband and the wife. I lived with them for 30 years. And plus they make me change my name from Skander Hoti to Kenneth Batson, which one was legally living with them and being 100% as their child.
Hi.
Hello.
Now, tell me about this mural of pictures you've got.
Yes, I made this for Alan, and I put the 3 categories before the abusive guardianship, which was a couple of years ago. This is him with his medals. He's a veteran, retired colonel. He was Corps of Engineers. That's us, and that's up in North Carolina. He loved to golf, so we went to all 3 golf courses in North Carolina, the most popular ones. That's him. This is he and I during his birthday at Don Cesar. We traveled there. This is in Walt Disney for his other birthday the year before that. And this is 3 years ago, a picture that I took of him. And he was happy and healthy with me. We were together, we were very happy.
I wanted to also say that my brother David took some money from my father, and they counted it over the phone to me, and we had told them that they needed to deposit the money. They were very upset. That's when they took over and took over my brother Jim's power of attorney. They took $9,311, and they hired attorneys to go against my father's own estate and his wishes of his estate, and to go against the power of attorney that they had selected. We tried to get for 9 months in front of the judge. We were denied every time. We had to hire almost, I think on our 4th attorney, we finally got in front of the judge because they knew that we were going to continue to try.
And what happened on that court hearing?
The first court hearing, the night before we got in front of the judge, our attorneys in Miami quit the night before. When I asked them when we got to the hearing if they were still our attorneys, they would not answer us. So they railroaded my mother and father's incompetency hearing into place, even though we had no legal counsel that they mentioned to us. So we stood there thinking we didn't have legal counsel. What I believe happened in the room was the judge knew she had to have legal counsel there, so she would not release those 2 attorneys to leave, which allowed them to believe and portray that we were being presented legally, and we really weren't, and then they railroaded my parents into incompetency that day.
And do you have anything to add to that?
I think the actions that were just a sequence of events are accurate. I think that the way the judge is involved in this entire charade in terms of how it unfolds is the judge knows exactly what they're doing, and they facilitate, aid, and abet, and allow all these crimes to continue. Specifically, if we fast forward to the final hearing, which was at the end of January in 2013, what happened at that hearing, I was never allowed to attend that hearing, and I was never in front of any of the depositions. They were very careful to keep me.
So you were sealed out.
I was sealed out, and because I'm a fairly intelligent individual, and I'm a military veteran from the Air Force and an academy graduate, and
tell me about this company that you guys created.
what
Is it available for the general public to call you?
Yes, it's the Florida Travel Advisory Council, the FTAC. They can get and find us on Facebook. We will be having a website soon. And it's basically to inform and educate people. We were not informed. We were lucky enough to meet other people that had this crimes against their families, and we were able to educate ourselves for the last 3 years. And we want to be able to share this education with the public, so this can't happen to other families. This is a criminal activity. It needs to be stopped. In my parents' case, there was abuse that took place during the emergency temporary guardianship, and my husband and I actually witnessed a little bit of it, and my father even at one point tried to escape. Every time we try to report
Repeatedly, the judges aren't qualified to do anything, and they purposely set up hearings so that they can inconvenience me and delay my due process. So the criminal matter started out with a petition filed by one of the state attorneys who's no longer with the state attorney, a woman named Natalie Marismo, who filed a petition stating on her own notice and information that I had attempted to remove my mother from the facility after I went in to see my mother, who was there after she was fraudulently taken or actually kidnapped by the predator guardian, Jacqueline Hertz, who had caused her to go into the hospital. So this originated in criminal court because the state attorney, Natalie Marismo, stated in a sworn statement that I had attempted to remove my mother. Natalie Marismo was involved in obstruction of justice, tampering with a witness, and material misstatement of fact. And she caused me to have house arrest placed on me because of her lies. When I pointed it out to the court, nothing was done about it. However, I noticed that she's no longer with the state attorney's office.
And what's the hearing today about?
So the hearing today, I'm not sure what the hearing today is about because I got no notice of the hearing today.
And did the judge the other day tell you that you got no notice on the last hearing?
That's correct. That's exactly correct. The judge, there was an emergency hearing apparently set where I got no notice, and then I got a call from the judge's secretary the following day to tell me that there was a hearing the prior day, but that nobody was given notice. Now, I set this up as an emergency hearing. Something went on the docket. I wasn't informed, and I wasn't there, and I immediately rescheduled it for the following day, and they refused to do that. The judge's explanation was that nobody got notice of the hearing. Everything that goes on in the criminal court is just a bunch of fraud, misstatements, misrepresentations, denials, and cover-ups. How is it possible that you can have a hearing without notice of a hearing? So
I
today,
don't know. That's kind of strange.
that's very strange. So today I have another hearing without a notice of a hearing. So I'm going to court without having any idea what's supposed to be happening today. I don't know.
My father's abuse or his escape, or anyone ever tried to report anything, including some of his best friends, they would not allow the reports to be submitted. I had to insist on a statement. Of course, any statements were always lost and never found again. We actually went on 2 days after Christmas on December 27th and of 2014 to see my parents. It was the three of us, my brother, my husband and myself, and I was fraudulently arrested. And it was unlawful arrest. I apologize because time is 3 years is a long time to remember every date, but it was really December 2012 that this took place, this fraudulent arrest, and it was by the Pinecrest Police Department. And what happened was, we went to make the report, and we had 5 police officers surround us when we called them. They found that there was no restraining orders against us whatsoever, and they went ahead and they just arrested us for anything because I was videotaping the fact that I could not see my parents and I could not enter into their home. When they saw
So they arrested you for videotaping?
They saw the videotape. The officer asked me to give him the tape recorder. I was on private property of the neighbors that I had asked permission to stay there, stand on. And I told him it was my personal property. Before I could even get that out, they had pulled the camera from my hands. 2 officers had come from behind me and handcuffed me and said, "You're under arrest for resisting arrest." We spent the night in jail, and I spent the night in jail, rather. And I spent the night, they had just done a prostitute.
This is the black and blue, the last of the many different accidents that they cannot explain to me because the guardian has manipulated everyone in the nursing home. They refuse to speak with
Guardian, his name is Roy Lustig. It's inconceivable how this attorney could come within anywhere near my mother because he's already been found guilty of crimes by the 3rd DCA. How is it possible that a person that's found guilty of crimes, it's like a child predator, could have anything to do with an elderly person? And the
Exactly.
court is well aware of it, and every time I expose the fraud, I get retaliated, and the court's trying to stop me from exposing the fraud that's going on.
Well, that's the court to bring up, abuse or whatever you're bringing up. They seem to, or if you write them a letter, to the attorney or to the guardian, they take that and they turn it completely around and then go and say, see to the judge, they turn everything and they say, oh, you see, she called DCF 3 times. That's abuse. How can I not call DCF and Adult Protective Services when my husband had a fractured ankle, when he had a cut, lacerated eye, when he had all these things? How could I not report it? The law says you must report when you suspect any kind of abuse, any kind of accident, abuse, you have to report it. And they say, oh, you see, that's abuse. She reports it, so we have to get rid of her. She's not to be allowed in a nursing home so that no one can report what's going on. We could just very easily do whatever we want with him.
Secrecy.
And,
It's
yeah,
secrecy.
secrecy
They want
and
you out of
isolation.
the picture so that they can do everything. They can do all of this horrible stuff in secrecy. But it's not a secret because the court knows that this is what's going on.
Not even a week after they stopped my visitations, they operated him and put him on the tube into his stomach. So they couldn't wait to get rid of me so that they could do that. And I just can't understand how this is going on. I don't understand.
When I first entered the guardianship, my mother entered the guardianship, we couldn't understand why I couldn't take care of my own mother. And as we got into the case, we found out that the lawyers start to say things in the court that are not true. For example, they would say that my mother got agitated when I was with her, which we had a very strong bond between my mother and myself, and so they would lie. And the whole lie is to get my mother isolated. So they're trying to isolate her from her family. Okay? So what we're talking about is the mantra to these guardianships are to isolate the elderly, medicate the elderly, and steal the state. Isolate, medicate, steal the state. So while in the beginning, my mother went into the court and she stated to Judge Levy, Bruce Levy, Your Honor, if I have to have a guardian, I want my son Robert. He's a medical doctor and a very loving and caring child. Judge Levy says, why don't you want your son Tony? And my mother said that he's got a lot of problems. And that's a very competent answer. From the beginning to the end, the whole case was a product of fraud among the judge, among the attorneys, and among the guardians. Within the first few months, we knew that something was very wrong, where our own lawyers would sell us out to the other side, didn't file proper documentation, and things like this. So what happens is normally the lawyer that I hired, sold me out, and my mother went into the guardianship. After the second year, we started researching, myself and others, victims, started researching. We found out something very big, that there's something called a probate rule, which is called Rule 99-10, which basically states that lawyers that are going to represent the alleged incapacitated person should be on a probate wheel, because lawyers were complaining that some people were getting all the big money cases and some people were getting the indigent cases. So we found out that they don't use the probate wheel, that the guardian brought her own attorney in, named Enrique Zamora, brought him into the case to represent my mother, and got her other attorney, David Mangiero, to represent her. Okay, all this, everybody was representing each other, but I'm the only one that didn't know. So my brother, who had hired an attorney that was all paid from my mother's side of the money, my brother never had to pay a dime. I had to pay everything out of my pocket. So this financial burden that was placed on me was all so that they could drain the assets. I never thought I wouldn't win, or else I would have never started to fight. Or of course I would have fought, because it's my mother and I love her. But what had happened was, we found out that the attorney, Enrique Zamora, was not only representing my mother, but at the same time was representing the guardian of my mother in other cases. And Cheryl Severman, who was my brother's attorney, was not only representing my brother, but was also representing Barbara Reiser in other cases. Conflicts of interest, ethical bar violations. The only problem is the Florida Bar does nothing to these people. I filed numerous bar complaints with the Florida Bar, and they don't do anything. I know that Zamora could not legally represent my mother because he was representing the guardian at the same time. And if you look at the case file, you'll see that Zamora did not file one document In 2 years, he didn't file one document in behalf of my mother and her express wishes to be with her son. So this is the appeal that we filed once we found out that Enrique Zamora was representing my mother and the guardian at the same time. My appellate attorney wrote, Zamora's fraud, because he denied representation, Zamora's fraud as established by certified record that accompanied Robert Sarhan's motion was central to the lack of independent representation, termination of the guardianship, and the restoration of right issues raised by his earlier motion, which was denied. Those records established that Zamora was representing the emergency temporary guardian, Barbara Reiser, in another guardianship proceedings, at the same time was representing my mother, Yvonne Sarhan, and that my mother, Yvonne Sarhan, was deprived of the entitlement to an independent attorney, free of any conflicts of interest, according to state law, which is 744.3312A, according to case law, the case law of Annabelle Fay, and Fay recognizes that such a deprivation is a fundamental error, a denial of procedural and substantial due process. And
my story, my parents are in guardianship, and I'm the durable power attorney for them. Was appointed by my father and my mother. Such as I was saying, we had 2 lawyers write to the judge that I'm convicted of any felony or admission of guilt and get the paperwork in. And they ignored all that. This is Stuart Marcus, as well as Sabrina Puglisi, a federal lawyer. And they try to use this against me on a regular basis. But the judge actually knew that I was not convicted, and she even mentioned that in court. And from that point on, we just,
And who were the guardians in your mother's case, in your father's case?
The guardians, my half-sister, Zeta Perez, and my brother, David Giffen. And the litem was Alex Coelho. And the judge was Judge Mayer.
And what were the attorney fees involved in the case?
On my brother and sister Zeta's behalf, I don't know. They were taken from my family's estate to pay their lawyer fees. On our side, about $100,000 or $100,000. That's from my brother-in-law Kevin, my sister Teresa, and a small portion of it is mine. The same time is, during this time that all this takeover was going, my brother and sister were doing really bad. She was already losing her houses. She was filing bankruptcy, and suddenly she took over my father instead. And now they saved everything. They saved their houses. They're paying themselves to take care of my father. As we talked to the court system, when we were trying to do the trials, everything was 100% lies. Nothing was true. We had facts and paperwork on everything that we did, and they had nothing but just accusations. Wow. My name is James Giffen again. Like I said, as they were trying to use the felony against me, the judge had ordered that we get 6 days. She'd give us 6 days to show the paperwork. We got the paperwork done in about 2 days. We got it into them, they ignored it. But 6 minutes after we left that courtroom, when she gave us the 6 days to 10 days, 6 minutes later, it was already done. She closed the books, she handed guardianship to my brother and my sister. She didn't care about my 6 days or me proving my innocence and me being able to be the power attorney. They already appointed it. Everything was gone. The cases that are going on in Miami-Dade County. This is my mother and father, and this is what goes on in Dade County. This is what goes on in the state of Florida, and it needs to stop. It's more than criminal. It's unbelievable.
So thank you for being on my TV show, and I appreciate you coming and talking to me about guardianships.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Kevin Pizzarello, and I've been involved in a guardianship case in terms of helping my brother-in-law, Jim Giffen, who was appointed the General Durable Power of Attorney, Healthcare Surrogate, Executor of the Trust, and also in the last will and testament. I've been in the family married for about 25 years, and I respected my father-in-law, respected his wishes, and I know as an individual, when he set out his advance directives, it was clear in his mind he knew exactly who he wanted to manage his estate and his affairs.
It's like insult on top of injury. They not only do all these horrible things to him physically, but how about the emotional, mental anguish that he has, not being able to see me, not being able to see any of his friends. They're not allowed, not even for his birthday. They came with gifts and flowers, and they were turned down. They said, no, you can't see him. I said, but this is his birthday. I have cards and everything for him. No, you can't go up to see him. This is the nursing home. The business director was there and stopped the people. And when it's not her, it's the nurses or it's the receptionist. They don't let anyone allowed up. He says the guardian said no one should come up except the people on his list. Now, who's on this list? Probably himself and his attorney, because no one else goes to see Alan. So I don't know what they're talking about. And it's just complete emotional and anguish and just completely psychological abuse. Not only to Alan, but to me. I have to admit, I have suffered very, very much. This is just horrible. Every time I see his pictures, I just want to die. And if you try to call, they'll hang up on you. I had a man from Veterans also. I had friends who have called. They won't tell them anything. If I call, they say, hold on, and then they leave me holding and they never come back. So it's just, it's such a horrible situation that a guardian can manipulate everyone in that nursing home to do as he wants. I mean, how could this be? How could a guardian manipulate a nursing home? The owners of this nursing home, they're in Tennessee someplace. Do they know that this is happening? That the guardian controls the doctors to do what he wants, to operate and do whatever he wants, and to have the people not let anyone in, going against the Nursing Home Bill of Rights, which I have here. And I cannot believe this is the Patient's Bill of Rights, that it says that you're supposed to let, whoever they want to come in, family and relatives. And there's also the Nursing Home Bill of Rights, and then there's the Ombudsman, the rights of the Ombudsman, what they do, etc. And I have called all of these people, and I have had no actual response. As a matter of fact, when I called the Ombudsman last week, again for the second time, they say, no, we can't do anything, although it says here that they can do a lot. And they said no, they could not.
Looks when we're walking into a surprise party for her birthday. My mother, she's emaciated. She looks like a child from a third world country. She's skin and bones. She's lost 30 pounds.
And is she in a nursing home?
No, this is when they took her into the hospital after they deprived her food, they deprived her medical services, and they took her into the hospital. And look at that. She's absolutely skin and bones. My mom's in the hospital. This was when she was admitted to the hospital after she had been fed. She's completely emaciated. She's there. None of the people explain to her what's going on. These people appear out of nowhere. She's absolutely terrorized. Look at the expression on her face. This is the way these people act towards people that are older when they should be dealing with them with the tenderest of care and explaining to her, Mrs. Stone, what we're going to do now is we're going to take you to get testing, or we're going to take you somewhere. But they pounce on her, and she has absolutely no idea who these people are or where she's going. She's being captured in the hospital. I mean, you can look at her face. She's just terrorized. And it's
proceedings. Moreover, the fraud in the court was itself rendered all the more egregious since the Moore and Risers, they were both officers of the court, had an ongoing affirmative duty to disclose to the court on their own initiative to tell them, the court about the conflicts, but they denied, they never said anything. So this whole case was a product of fraud, and we went to the 3rd District Court of Appeals, and they just ruled per curiam they wasn't going to change anything. But the big part of the case is Judge Celeste Meir, who was my mother's judge. I got 3 judges recused off my case. That they put my mother on a medication called Seroquel, which is contraindicated. It causes sudden cardiac death and strokes. So the last 2 years of the guardianship, or last year, 2 years, they put my mother on this medication to intentionally end her life. That the money was all gone now. The money was dwindling away, and they put her on a high dose of Seroquel, which caused her to have sudden cardiac death, which it says on her death certificate. And as well, which says on the black box warning of Seroquel not to be given to elderly people. What's happened is that they got this doctor named Dr. Stephen Leslie Kaplan to put my mother on a lethal dose of medication, which was Seroquel, which was contraindicated, and she died of sudden cardiac death by the medicine. This doctor has been suspended, his license has been suspended, but he continues to do these things only for the love of money. That's what this whole guardianship issue is about. They don't care about the elderly people, they're just doing this for money. There's a document that I found, which we do have the proof that my mother was fully competent, but there's a document here which Judge Celeste Meir wrote to all the victims, all the people, the criminals in my case. So Judge Meir wrote this document on November 19, 2010, and she wrote this letter to all the people that were in my case, stating that Robert Sarhan is going to lose his home. He's in for... So this is the doctor, Dr. Stephen Leslie Kaplan is the one that ordered my mother to get this Seroquel. Dr. Stephen Leslie Kaplan. This is a document from the Miami Herald, which was written on May 12, 2010. That was that he had killed a little boy, a little 12-year-old boy, from overdosing him with medication. He's been reprimanded many times by the medical bar, but they did not take his license away. And so now he's, when the guardians look for people like him that are willing to overdose elderly people to end their lives, and the judges will protect this doctor. And so this is why they got this particular doctor, because they looked for him, they found him. About my appearance here, I seen a couple outside, a man that was pushing around his girlfriend, and I tried to ask him to please don't hurt her, and he came up and headbutt me. Didn't have a chance to defend myself. That's why I look the way I do.
So Bill Windsor of Lawless America.
Bill Windsor of Lawless America went around the country to talk about all the judicial misconduct by judges and lawyers and what's going on in this country. And my story is on YouTube. So if you type in YouTube on Robert Sarhan, MD, my story will come up. You can look at the video. It's about a 2 or 3 minute video on guardianships that I did, which is supposed to be an upcoming movie for Bill Windsor. This whole thing started in 2003, and I was doing very well in my life. I was working for the Department of Justice. I was treating patients in a federal prison. Everything was going fine until my mom called me and asked me that she wanted me to care for her. And the next thing you know, I'm in front of a court that's not a legal court. It's not a legitimate court. It's a fraudulent court with fraudulent judges. And the reason that these judges do what they do is for money. And they know, the judges have no fear, because for 12 years I've been fighting this. They know that there's nobody there that's going to do anything to stop them. Our congressmen, our senators do nothing. In December 1987, we talked about before, Congressman Claude Pepper wrote, "Guardianships in America, a national disgrace." In 1999, Mark D. Andrews wrote, "Guardianships in America, a crisis of constitutional proportion." We have a senator named Senator Herb Kohl that's been doing something for 13 years. He's been a senator for many, many more years than that. And he's on the elderly, he's supposed to protect elderly people, and has done nothing. So we know that this government is not protecting the elderly people, is doing nothing to stop this crime. In fact, because it doesn't benefit them to stop it, they probably make money off of it. For when congressmen and senators want to get reelected, they go to these guardians and attorneys for money, they steal the money from our parents, and they give them the...
Allie. Before she became an attorney, she was a legal guardian and then she became an elder, I believe you call it elder law. Then she became a judge. And for the 18th Judicial Circuit, she wrote a manual on how to handle guardianship when you become a guardian. The major part of the manual describes how you can find jewelry in a person's home. She says, go to the ward's home and look in cold cream jars, because very often elderly people hide diamond rings in cold cream jars. This tells you a lot about this judge and where her mind is, and the issues are money and greed.
I'd really like you to understand what Judge Nancy Alley has done. She has gone so far as to write an order for her friend, Sergeant Commanderio, stating that I cannot make any criminal reports to the police or any agency in reference to his behavior or his abuse of my son. I have a copy of the order.
This is the judicial qualifications complaint that I made in reference to Judge Nancy Alley and her writing the order disallowing me to make criminal complaints against the guardian. So I did complain to the Judicial Qualifications Committee, and they sent me a letter back saying that it was not going to be dealt with. And so I've been reporting the harassment of the guardian of my son. He is a deputy sheriff, and he's been having people do pullovers on me because I complained about him. And my son registered a complaint with the sheriff's department about his guardian. So I went into the courtroom unsedated with his communication device, and he did not bring my son into the courtroom. So the judge did not. I carried this photograph into the hearing to show Judge Stacy, my son, and I was hoping that his guardian would honor the subpoena and bring him into the courtroom, but this is about the third time he's refused to show up. He typically tells people that he is a Seminole County Sheriff Deputy and he has more authority than the judge. And he tells that to the people at the home where my son lives, and tells them, do not let Brad's mother come into the house to visit him, because he's the guardian and he's a sheriff's deputy, so he has more power than the judge. Some of the people that work there from the Dominican Republic, and they actually believe that in the United States, a deputy and a guardian has more authority. Before she became an attorney, she was a legal guardian, and then she became an elder, I believe you call it elder law. Then she became a judge. And for the 18th Judicial Circuit, she wrote a manual on how to handle guardianship when you become a guardian. The major part of the manual describes how you can find jewelry in a person's home. She says, go to the ward's home and look in cold cream jars, because very often elderly people hide diamond rings in cold cream jars. This tells you a lot about this judge and where her mind is, and the issues are money and greed.
I'd really like you to understand what Judge Nancy Alley has done. She has gone so far as to write an order for her friend, Sergeant Commanderio, stating that I cannot make any criminal reports to the police or any agency in reference to his behavior or his abuse of my son. I have a copy of the order.
This is the judicial qualifications complaint that I made in reference to Judge Nancy Alley and her writing the order disallowing me to make criminal complaints against the guardian. So I did complain to the Judicial Qualifications Committee, and they sent me a letter back saying that it was not going to be dealt with. And
I've been reporting the harassment of the guardian of my son. He is a deputy sheriff, and he's been having people do pullovers on me because I complained about him. And my son registered a complaint with the sheriff's department about his guardian. So what he's been doing, and I've reported it, and there are police reports that go unheeded by the police department. He's also threatened me and my husband and my son's life, and we have recordings that he left on our telephone. And the day before yesterday, I had another hearing. I've been going through hearings over the last 8.5 years. My son's guardian was subpoenaed to come into the courtroom and produce documents. He did not show up, and he was required by this subpoena to bring my son into the courtroom unsedated with his communication device, and he did not bring my son into the courtroom. So the judge did not. I carried this photograph into the hearing to show Judge Stacy my son, and I was hoping that his guardian would honor the subpoena and bring him into the courtroom, but this is about the third time he's refused to show up. He typically tells people that he is a Seminole County Sheriff Deputy and he has more authority than the judge. And he tells that to the people at the home where my son lives, and tells them, do not let Brad's mother come into the house to visit him, because he's the guardian and he's a sheriff's deputy, so he has more power than the judge. Some of the people that work there from the Dominican Republic, and they actually believe that in the United States, a deputy and a guardian has more.
Some days there, and I brought something from the university where his fraternity, which I saw this for the first time. I saw this a couple of weeks ago, and I cried because I couldn't understand how someone could be so gentle and caring and wise and true and loyal. And then I read this. He was so proud of his ring, which I should have brought today. I have it, of his fraternity. And this is his fraternity motto. And I said, oh my God, this is him. This completely describes Alan from head to toe. The true gentleman, which is the Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity.
This case, what happened with the arrest?
The arrest was never even brought into the courts. It was never even documented, and it was just dropped.
And did they confiscate your camera and the film?
They confiscated the camera, and what they did was it cost us about almost up to $3,000 to get out of the situation, and then about 9 months later they just picked up the phone and said it's dropped. We did get the camera back, but the part where they fraudulently arrested us was tampered with and it was erased. But it does show, the tape does show other things that are...
Okay. So thank you for being on my TV show, and I look forward to interviewing you again.
I would like to say one thing.
Okay.
My father's abuse, I have presented it to the judge. And I also went to the Capitol of Florida and presented it to the elderly board, the elder board there in the Capitol in Tallahassee. Each time, I've also showed it to every one of my attorneys. Each time I've ever showed it to anyone, they have totally ignored it. We have told DCF in many instances and reports, they have ignored it. And then I even showed the governor of our state the abuse of my father, a photograph, and he's never reached out to us, not once.
And you think somebody should take responsibility?
I think the governor of our state should take responsibility and make sure that the other people in these parties are in trouble for what they've done and stop this behavior, because if he doesn't, he's allowing the state of Florida to steal.
Guardian, his name is Roy Lustig. It's inconceivable how this attorney could come within anywhere near my mother, because he's already been found guilty of crimes by the 3rd DCA. How is it possible that a person that's found guilty of crimes, it's like a child predator? could have anything to do with an elderly person. And the
Exactly.
court is well aware of it, and every time I expose the fraud, I get retaliated, and the court's trying to stop me from exposing the fraud that's going on.
Well, that's the court to bring up, abuse or whatever you're bringing up. They seem to, or if you write them a letter, to the attorney or to the guardian, they take that and they turn it completely around and then go and say, see to the judge, they turn everything and they say, oh, you see, she called DCF 3 times. That's abuse. How can I not call DCF and Adult Protective Services when my husband had a fractured ankle, when he had a lacerated eye, when he had all these things? How could I not report it? The law says you must report when you suspect any kind of abuse, any kind of accident, abuse, you have to report it. And they say, oh, you see, that's abuse. She reports it, so we have to get rid of her. She's not to be allowed in a nursing home so that no one can report what's going on. We could just very easily do whatever we want with him.
Secrecy.
And,
It's
yeah.
secrecy.
Secrecy
They want
and
you out of
isolation.
the picture so that they can do everything. They can do all of this horrible stuff in secrecy. But it's not a secret because the court knows that this is what's going on.
Not even a week after they stopped my visitations, they had operated him and put him on the tube into his stomach. So they couldn't wait to get rid of me so that they could do that. And I just can't understand how this is going on. I don't understand.
Well, just to get back for a minute, and so we don't switch around to too many things, but in connection with the isolation and with these orders that the judge issues, and they're removing a parent from their child, or they're removing a husband from his wife. So they think that they're punishing me. Well, maybe they do. They understand the whole picture. They're punishing my mother because my mother has a daughter that she's desperate to have take care of her. So the judge issues this fraudulent, illegal gag order that's telling you and it's telling me that we can't report abuse. So he's violating the law. He's violating Florida statutes, he's violating federal statutes, and he's telling me to be a criminal. The law.
And they don't see not only it's like insult on top of injury. They not only do all these horrible things to him physically, but how about the emotional, mental anguish that he has, not being able to see me, not being able to see any of his friends. They're not allowed, not even for his birthday. They came with gifts and flowers, and they were turned down. He says, no, you can't see him. I said, but this is his birthday. I have cards and everything for him. No, you can't go up to see him. This is the nursing home. The business director was there and stopped the people. And when it's not her, it's the nurses or it's the receptionist. They don't let anyone allowed up. He says the guardian said no one should come up except the people on his list. Now, who's on his list? Probably himself and his attorney, because no one else goes to see Alan. So I don't know what they're talking about. And it's just complete emotional and anguish and just completely psychological abuse, not only to Alan, but to me. I have to admit, I have suffered very, very much. This is just horrible. Every time I see his pictures, I just want to die.
Your estate is what he's allowing.
CD and is working on a committee in reference to some legislature that may affect the guardianship.
And it's
laws.
Senator Sokol?
Yes. So I gave her a picture of my son, and I gave her a copy of this affidavit. And in this affidavit, I say that
Hi, this is Kevin and Teresa again. I just wanted to close up and offer the following comments here on the case that my wife and my brother-in-law have experienced. At the last hearing, which took place January 31st of 2013, the judge said there was a lot of information that was provided by both sides and that she would wait 10 days to make a ruling. So what happened is my wife and my brother-in-law spent several days to meet her 10-day deadline, which resulted in this packet that was 250 pages approximately of exhibits, narrative, fraudulent documents, PowerPoint presentation on all the sequence of events that had taken place in the case, so it would be documented, because our attorneys would never document anything. The attorneys for my wife and my brother-in-law only did what they wanted to do, and as a result, when this document was submitted to the judge at about day 7 or 8 by my wife and my brother-in-law, it became apparent when they tried to file for an appeal that the judge ruled 10 minutes after they left the courtroom, and we were never notified that. So all this work they spent to put this together was never seen and never heard, and that's also part of the pattern. And during this same hearing, the judge also lied by saying that there was 45 minutes or 45 to 60 days to do the appeal, when in reality it was only 30 days. And I just want to be clear that you will never find this on any transcript or anything else, because the transcripts get altered.
And documents in the record get altered.
And documents in the records get altered.
And the case register gets altered.
The docket is also subject to altering. So these are some of the things that people have to deal with, and that is why, until the laws change in Florida, the FTAC encourages people not to move, retire, or travel in Florida and spend money here, because until the state is financially crippled by tourism, they just don't care. That's the perception.
Son Brad, he's a brilliant young man. He uses a communication device like Stephen Hawkins. In fact, he met Stephen Hawkins. But his injury to his brain is called cerebral palsy, and that affects only the muscles. Your tongue is a large muscle, so when you meet someone with cerebral palsy and they communicate with you, they always have this heavy tongue sound. And but their cognitive level is sky high. In many cases, just take a look at Stephen Hawking, the physicist. He looks like he's severely retarded and he can't use his muscles, but he's a brilliant man. My son Brad Rakowski is a brilliant young man. The problem is that he was going to inherit some money, and Sergeant David Commanderia was aware of it, and when we were out of town, got guardianship of Brad and isolated him. So now he's not permitted to use his communication device. And anyway, I just appreciate the folks that are interested in helping. When I discovered this guardianship situation with my son and the abuses that he was experiencing, I went to Washington. I talked to my congressman. I made trips to Washington. I've contacted President Obama. I've written to him and each one of my congressmen. My governor has information on the predator guardian in my son's case, being a sheriff deputy and misusing his authority to intimidate everyone that tries to stop his abuse of my son. I have been to the state attorney's office. I've been to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and I just it's been years that I thought I was doing this all by myself until I went on YouTube and discovered all of the other people in the state of Florida and the United States that were suffering the same kind of abuses. So, I appreciate all the people that have taken an interest. And my experience is that recently, within the last month, I've personally visited Judge Evander. He's the Judicial Qualifications Committee. I was personally in Tallahassee and took my complaint about this Judge Nancy Alley. Personally took my documents up there. Then I went to Evander, who is the chair of the Judicial Qualifications Committee. I took my son's picture and I took my story about Judge Nancy Alley and her security person that got guardianship of my son. And I spoke to his secretary, his JA. It was a federal office and they wouldn't let me into his area. But I told my story and showed my picture to his judicial assistant. And she said, well, this needs to go back to the Judicial Qualifications Committee. It has to go through the channels. And I said, it's already been there. And I just would like him to know that my son is a human being. And so I've visited his office. And so I've made trips to a variety of...
We need to speak up loud and clear. The phone number is 800-486-2350, and again, 800-486-2350. And I look forward to hearing from everybody, and I look forward to exposing this really deep, dark secret so that it's not a deep, dark secret anymore. And all of these adult predators who are just like child molesters get outed out of the closet, and this doesn't happen to anyone ever again, ever. Our elderly and our children are the most vulnerable people, and they're precious to us, and we need to protect them. Sitting amongst piles and piles of paper that Catherine Fernandez Rundle has had her minions in the state attorney's office prepare, wasting, defrauding the taxpayers, suing a daughter for rescuing her mother from abuse from a predator guardian, which Catherine Fernandez Rundle should have rescued my mother from when I filed with her a petition for a grand jury indictment. So now, as we continue this charade where she's continuing to insist that I can't see my mother as my mother's getting killed in front of her very eyes, so I filed a subpoena to ask Catherine Rundle what information she has about me that's going to cause her to file charges against me. So when I went to court to take her deposition, she had her attorneys file this very thick document listing all kinds of reasons why she's allowed to falsely arrest me, but she's not, but she wants protection from the court as to why she falsely arrests me. Well, Catherine Fernandez Rundle, I really don't think that works. I think that you should answer my question as to why you arrested me.